Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
The National Weather Service is warning of high surf and coastal flooding into the new year. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. Forecasters say the conditions may be dangerous. KPBS reporter Andrew Dyer spoke with San Diego lifeguards about what to expect and how to stay safe.
In Ocean Beach Thursday, swells as high as single-story houses routinely rolled in and occasionally peaked high enough to wash over the pier, which is closed through storm season. A couple surfers paddled out and a few people tried swimming near the beach, but most of the gathered crowd were there just to see the swells. San Diego lifeguard Lieutenant Lonnie Stevens says with these conditions, that's the safest strategy.
So we want people to enjoy the wonders of Mother Nature because it does not happen very often, but we want them to enjoy it from a distance and make sure you're in a safe spot when you're watching the waves.
The source of the large waves are a pair of Arctic storm fronts in the northern Pacific. The highest swells, along with rain, are expected Saturday. Stevens says wave faces as high as 20 feet are possible. Deadly conditions for anyone without proper training and experience.
For surfers who want to get in the water, make that self-inventory. Have you been training? Land-based training. Have you been training in the water? Have you been going on surf trips around the world and participating in very large surf events? If you haven't, then this is life-threatening to you as well. So take that personal inventory and be honest with yourself.
Surfer Aaron Peach just came out of the water at Dog Beach north of the pier. He says the swells here are more manageable, but that's changing fast.
I seen a couple over the pier. That right there is probably that's 10-foot face right there in the inside. It's starting to get big though, absolutely, yeah.
A National Weather Service high surf warning and coastal flood advisory is in effect through Monday morning. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
If your New Year's plans are taking place in the eastern U.S., you may face a tricky travel situation. A flood watch is in effect for more than 10 million people across the Northeast as a low-pressure system moves eastward. Reed Binion reports.
We continue to have new problems that arise. So we'll fix one area and another problem shows up.
Crews from no less than 8 power companies are still working to restore electricity in parts of North Dakota and Minnesota after a Christmas week ice storm toppled hundreds of power poles there.
There's a lot of power lines that are down. It's going to take a long time to put those back up. So time, it's going to take a lot more time than we originally thought.
For some customers, the lights may not be on again until this weekend. For others, it might not be until next week.
Our entire crews have been out working. We have a lot of support staff out there doing assessments. So it's really unknown at this point how long it will take to restore all of the members.
Meanwhile, in South Dakota, snow cleanup is underway after the winter wallop created hazardous road conditions this week. Colorado also getting hit with a wintry blast that made road travel treacherous. The severe winter weather that swept across the plains, upper Midwest, and up into the Northeast is also adding to air travel headaches during one of the year's busiest weeks. I'm Reed Binion reporting.
We have coastal flooding advisories out from Santa Monica all the way down to Chula Vista, so you want to make sure that you're being careful heading out the door and toward the water the next few days. But we are seeing a little bit more in the way of turbulent weather. There's some rain on the way. We'll talk more about that coming up.
Major changes are coming to the U.S.-Mexico border, stemming from talks between senior officials from both countries. Those were held yesterday. One of those changes, the formation of a task force to help alleviate the migrant crisis. Customs and Border Patrol says December is on track to have the highest number of migrant apprehensions ever. The influx caused CBP to close Ped West to free up resources to help with migrants. Reopening the port is one of the task force's main goals. Mexican leaders say Mexico will meet regularly with countries in Central and Latin America, with the next meeting set for January. The COVID-19 pandemic spread far and wide in its first 2.5 years. How far and how wide and how it affected San Diego is what the scientists at Scripps Research tried to find out. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us what they learned.
When people talk about variants of the COVID virus called SARS-CoV-2, we tend to use broad terms like Omicron and Delta. But scientists who track the virus can get a lot more specific. Epidemiologist Mark Zeller is with Scripps Research. He says they compared data from more than 80,000 COVID samples from the region, and the viruses they examined were constantly on the move, replicating and mutating.
And this sort of adds up to approximately one mutation every 10 days or so. So based on this information, we can sort of build a family tree of all the virus sequences we have.
In the Scripps Research study published in the journal Cell, researchers also wanted to determine how travel patterns affected the virus. They did that by looking at cell phone data that showed where people were and where they were going.
And we show a really good correlation between the connectedness based on the viral genome data and their travel data based on the cell phone.
Describing the movement of these viral variants depends on what part of the pandemic you're looking at. Scripps Research examined cases from the pandemic's beginning in 2020 to midway through 2022. Early on, travel restrictions and stay-at-home orders were common here and around the country. Add to that the reluctance of people to travel, and you have a very limited geographic spread of viruses. When those local mandates were lifted, it became a different story, as new variants were showing up in San Diego and spreading rapidly.
So typically whenever a new wave comes in, the local transmission increases, right? Because, there's a new variant which has a lot of susceptible hosts within San Diego County, so it can just burn through those.
By late in the pandemic, about half of the viruses circulating were established local variants. The other half were recently introduced due to travel outside the region. One finding in the study showed that banning non-essential travel across the Mexican border had little to no effect on COVID risk in San Diego. Zeller says in general, targeted measures that try to stop the flow of people from a specific place are quite ineffective.
Because by the time you have detected these variants, it is probably already too late, and that variant has escaped the particular targeted area or targeted country.
There's no question. Restrictions on travel and social distancing regulations do limit disease transmission in an epidemic. But Zeller admits in an interconnected world, viruses will ultimately travel as freely as we choose to. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Earlier this year, a New York hedge fund that owns more than 200 newspapers nationwide bought the San Diego Union Tribune. KPBS reporter Amitha Sharma says those with questions about what will happen next can look to newspapers in neighboring counties for answers.
Sitting outside a sandwich shop on a recent fall afternoon, Riverside resident Robbie Short says he's a regular voter, but he never reads the local newspaper, the Press Enterprise, before voting. In fact, he does no research at all.
I always see the same names most of the time, and if I see a new name, I'll look them up, or I won't even look them up and I'll just vote for the new name, because why not?
Former Riverside Mayor Ron Loveridge says the Press Enterprise used to matter a lot more to residents. He recalls a time more than a decade ago when people in the community and elected officials read the local paper first thing in the morning.
I'd be surprised if anybody at City Hall looks at the press enterprise now.
Today, the newsroom that once employed more than 100 journalists covering all of Riverside County is now down to a handful of reporters. In 2016, the New York-based hedge fund Alden Global Capital bought the press enterprise. A significant number of those cuts have happened since then.
The watchdog function is not there. The information function is not there. We are an explicit example of the kind of disappearance of local news.
This July, Alden acquired the San Diego Union Tribune. There are already signs that the Union Tribune is likely following in the footsteps of the press enterprise and other Alden newspapers. Buyouts, layoffs, bare bones local coverage. Hours after Alden announced it bought the Union Tribune, the company offered buyouts. Journalists left with decades of community memory of corruption cases, courts, public safety, and politics. Leverage says this leaves communities divorced from the give and take of formulating policy and from democracy itself.
In American politics, access is local. It is not at the state, it's not at the federal level, it is local. The absence of information makes this democratic conversation locally almost non-existent.
The Orange County Register is another cautionary tale. 20 years ago, the paper had hundreds of journalists covering San Diego's neighbor to the north. Frank Mickadite worked as a reporter, editor, and columnist for the Register. He says its mission was to saturate the county with news coverage.
We had, an investigative team, and we just poured a lot of money into and resources into just every corner of journalism that existed and that we tried to invent. And it was exciting to be part of that.
Alden bought the Register in 2016. Now, sources at the paper say one reporter has to cover as many as 5 big cities. Consider a recent scandal at Anaheim City Hall. Details didn't come to light until the city released its own investigative report.
And what's kind of scary about it is that we found out about Anaheim, but who knows how many other Anaheims are out there? We don't know, and we may never know.
Lifelong Anaheim resident Cynthia Ward says now the public must grapple with the consequences.
When corruption goes unchecked, it means that money that should be coming into our communities is going into the pockets of special interests, which means our taxes have to go up to fill potholes and do the things that we count on because that money has been siphoned off. So ultimately, we pay.
Mickadite says the entire country, the very republic, is in trouble if local news coverage continues its downward slide. But he does not begrudge Alden or other private equity firms for hollowing out newsrooms.
They do what they do, and it's like blaming a shark for doing what a shark does. I mean, it's just...
He says we're all to blame for letting it happen. Amita Sharma, KPBS News.
New York City is beefing up security ahead of the iconic ball drop in Times Square. While the city adds more patrols during this time every year, there's additional concern amid the Israel-Hamas war and recent protests across the state. Jen Sullivan looks at the precautions the city is taking.
It's one of the world's biggest New Year's Eve celebrations. Watching the ball drop in New York's Times Square. Roughly 60,000 people turn out to ring in the new year in New York. But with those big crowds come big safety concerns.
There's always a serious concern around safety in New Year's Eve.
But this year, there are additional concerns. Amid the Israel-Hamas war, as the conflict abroad affects the streets of New York. Pro-Israel and pro-Palestine protesters taking to the streets, sometimes clashing with police. Since Hamas attacked Israel on October 7th, New York City Mayor Eric Adams says there have been nearly 500 protests throughout the city during a pro-Palestine protest on Christmas Day. Adams says NYPD called a level 3 mobilization, the second highest threat.
These are very volatile situations.
Last month, during the iconic Rockefeller Center tree lighting, which is nationally broadcast, protesters swarmed the area.
The police department did an amazing job during the tree lighting to mitigate any form of major disruptions.
With all eyes on Times Square ahead of New Year's Eve, NYPD is worried protesters could once again try and disrupt this high-profile event. NYPD will be using drones to monitor New Year's Eve crowds, vehicle scanning devices, and radiation detectors to make sure the new year rings in safely. In New York, I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
Well, we're just days away from the start of that new year, but before 2023 comes to a close, you can make your health a priority. Mandy Gaither has your year-end health list to check off before we count down.
If your 2023 health goals didn't quite turn out like you hoped, it's not too late.
The end of the year can be a good time to check in with yourself and make sure that you've done all the things that you need to do to keep yourself healthy.
Dr. Lisa Lamond with Mayo Clinic says first on your year-end checklist, if you haven't done it already, go ahead and get an appointment for a routine wellness exam.
They're going to do a full physical exam. They're going to check routine laboratory studies, and they're going to talk to you about your healthcare screenings.
Scheduling those screenings is next on the list. They vary depending on age, health and family history, and gender. But consider screenings for certain types of cancer, high blood pressure or high cholesterol, diabetes, osteoporosis, sexually transmitted diseases, and mental health conditions like depression or anxiety. Also, make sure you're up to date on your vaccinations.
It is not too late to get your flu or updated COVID vaccines. And there is a new vaccine that's available for RSV.
Lamont says to put heart health on your list, eating right and being active can help that. And finally, make good quality sleep a priority.
In order to help improve your sleep, try to avoid looking at screens for at least 30 minutes prior to bedtime. And also remember to exercise during the daylight hours.
For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
A new sporting and concert venue is expected to open in Oceanside by next year. KPBS North County reporter Tanya Thorne has an update on what will be known as the Frontwave Arena.
Construction crews still have their work cut out for them, but Oceanside's Frontwave Arena is coming along. The seating, arena, and steel structures are taking shape.
We're right in the midst of, finalizing our last year of construction, so we're about 70% complete, 2 or 3 years into the project, and looking to get through the next phase and open here in late summer.
Josh Elias is the co-founder and chief operating officer of the Frontwave Arena. The name comes from the Frontwave Credit Union, formerly known as Pacific Marine Credit Union.
Frontwave Credit Union stepped in really early on this project in, 2022, before we were essentially out of the ground. So to have an interested party come in that early really showed the vision of what the credit union is looking to do in the community.
Last year, Frontwave Credit Union signed a 10-year naming rights contract with the arena, but it's not one of the arena's owners. 3 groups with North County roots are privately funding the project that is expected to cost more than $80 million.
As long as we program the arena properly and, bring shows and events that are meaningful, we feel like, we're not only servicing North County and South Orange County and South Riverside, but also all of San Diego County.
The arena is going up in Oceanside's El Corazon Park, an area that is also home to an aquatic center, senior center, and is still undergoing new development.
Put a 170,000 square foot venue inside of an area. There's an impact to the community around it. And so we've had to be thoughtful through the process.
Neighboring the new arena is also the SoCal Sports Complex, tournament soccer fields that get more than 1 million visitors each year.
We will learn a lot as we open, but we promise that we're going to put the effort in to make sure that it is the best experience as possible and, make it good.
Next year, the San Diego Sockers will be calling the Frontwave Arena their new home, after finishing this season at Pechanga Arena.
I can't tell you the amount of outreach from not only food and beverage partners that want to be a part of it locally and in Orange County, but just entertainment promotions, and everybody's excited to have something that's in between Los Angeles and San Diego, because there's never been anything here to this scale.
The indoor arena seats 7,500 people. It can also cut seating to accommodate smaller events. Its outdoor plaza will have food vendors available to the public year-round and an outdoor stage. Frontwave Arena is expected to open late summer next year. Tanya Thorne, KPBS News.
Heads up as the weather becomes a bit more turbulent. We already have some weather alerts out along the coast, looking at some high surf advisories for Santa Monica and even down to Huntington Beach. And then as you head to Oceanside, San Diego, and Chula Vista, looking at more in the way of high surf warnings. But that's not all. We're also looking at some coastal flooding concerns here. Advisories out, really stretching down the Southern California coastline from Santa Monica all the way down to Chula Vista. This is again as the weather becomes a bit more turbulent, and you'll see that here with your headlines. Let's dig into it. Dry through Friday, so at least some more sunshine sticks around for now anyway, but we turn cooler and wetter as we head into the weekend. Not great news for the last weekend of 2023, unfortunately. Now, showers stick around not just this weekend, but we're back into the rain this coming week as well. Let's start with this here tonight. It's not the rainfall just yet, but some areas of patchy fog later on, or low temperature, I should say, of 49 degrees. And then you can see more widespread. We're really in the 40s for most of our Southern California cities here. Escondido at 43 overnight. That fog sticks around. Looking at Ramona at 39 degrees, Oceanside 45, and Chula Vista at 48 degrees overnight. Now, as we head into tomorrow, things are, well, considerably sunnier. Not bad in Mount Laguna at 48. And with that sunshine, it'll feel beautiful. El Cajon at 68 degrees. And then San Diego as we head toward the coast at 65. Chula Vista 65 as well. And even looking at 66 in Oceanside. But what comes next, again, it's some more, well, not so nice weather. Enjoy the sun while you've got it. You can see along the coast. Check out Saturday here. We end up with morning rain, and then even on Sunday we keep the clouds around and keep a shower in the beginning of your forecast, at least in the beginning of the day, before more sunshine comes back Monday and Tuesday. As we head a little bit further to our inland empire here, you can see more in the way of sunshine on Friday, but here comes that rain on Saturday, cooler as well into the low 60s. Then we head a little bit further along into the mountains, and you'll notice that it's the same pattern here, but even cold enough for snow on Saturday rather than rain. Then we take you to the desert where we keep more sunshine around Monday and Tuesday, but not before. We're cloudy and cool on Sunday. For KPBS News, I'm Christina Shalhoub.
Businesses near Petco Park are getting a shot in the arm, courtesy of yesterday's Holiday Bowl game. This time of year is usually slow for bars and restaurants in the area due to baseball season being over. They say that's why they look forward to the Holiday Bowl for that extra boost. Bar manager Anna Hadari says people don't just come to town a day early for the game, but stay after to explore the city.
Business-wise, we need it badly. It all dies down so quickly, and we just hang on for dear life. So the Holiday Bowl comes along and really helps us out and keeps the staff motivated as well. Just gives downtown a little bit more life, a little more spirit this time of year.
This was the second year Petco Park has hosted the Holiday Bowl, and maybe a little surprisingly, USC beat out Louisville 42-28. Meanwhile, volunteers in South Pasadena put the finishing touches on the floats for the Rose Parade. The parade starts at 8 a.m. New Year's Day. The theme this year, celebrating a world of music, the universal language. The Alabama Crimson Tide will take on the Michigan Wolverines in the bowl game, and that starts at 2 p.m. Ron Jackson lives in Little Italy and decided the best way to make a movie was to center all the action in his own condo. KPBS cinema junkie Beth Accomando takes us behind the scenes of Murder and Cocktails, which starts streaming next month.
Ron Jackson remembers going to the movies as a kid with his dad.
I would go to a matinee, it was 25 cents, and that feeling of being in that dark room and being transported to another place, another time, whether it was adventure or whatever, just never left me. Yeah, that feeling of watching a great story just never went away, and I wanted to be part of that.
We're all like that on my father's side.
By the way, how is your father's side?
Oh, it's much better, thanks. And yours?
He was inspired by the relationship of Nick and Nora Charles in the old Thin Man movies.
It's just a lovely study in two people, man and wife, Bernard Loy and William Powell, who are in love with each other. They have quick banter, they drink a lot, they have fun, they've got some crazy friends, And I always kind of wanted to do a movie that could pick up that kind of energy.
He also loved the comedy style of George Burns and Gracie Allen.
And in their TV program, he would walk out and he would break the fourth wall. And he would be talking to the audience, and then he would walk into the story.
But how could Jackson turn his love for these vintage shows and movies into something that could play for a contemporary audience?
What is that?
What?
That? The camera?
It is.
Jackson's solution was to create a witty married couple who decide to employ modern technology to make a little money. But when a neighbor they invited for dinner gets shot, their streaming content takes a surprising turn.
Wait, I have an idea. We invite everybody over on the floor one by one, and we give them drinks, and we loosen them up.
The result is Murder and Cocktails, a film Jackson produced for an amazing $75,000.
Oh, sorry. I'm Nick McCoy, Lana's husband.
And it was largely filmed in my condo. We have this little area here, which we call the lounge, and the couple, Nick and Lana McCoy, usually sit in these two chairs.
People are watching us right now?
Hopefully. Let me see.
It looks on screen, the lounge looks a lot bit bigger than it actually is.
37.
37 people are watching.
Yeah, and the more people that watch, the more money we make.
And, I wrote this story around what I can do, which is I could manage this location, I could manage the finances, and I also use a lot of like San Diego stuff. The way this got done was really by kind of shrinking down the footprint.
But Jackson's condo provides plenty of room for Nick and Lana to host Murder and Cocktails. So pour yourself a martini and get ready to figure out who done it when the film starts streaming next month. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Looks great. Thanks for joining us and have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Previs Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.